You know, Chris Wallace was saying while we were watching all of this, that question, there was a lot of discussion over how this would go, and it was sort of two different paths. They said they wanted him to animate the words of the report, and then there was also the line, nail him down with yes or no answers, you know, in terms of the questioning. It seems like they've gone with the latter, mostly, Chris.
Yeah, you know, I had to laugh a little bit when you talked about the testimony by Robert Mueller, because I think testimony has to be put in quotes. It really hasn't been much testimony. Frankly, I think you've both been very kind. I think this has been a disaster for the Democrats, and I think it's been a disaster for the reputation of Robert Mueller. He has seemed very uncertain with his brief. He doesn't seem to know what things that are in the report. He's been attacked a number of times, and you would think that almost anybody else would have defended his own integrity and the integrity of the investigation, and over Mueller just sits silent and allows the attacks from the Republicans to sweep over him and says nothing. I think it does raise questions about the degree to which he actually was in charge of and control of this report, because he doesn't seem very much in control or charge of what the final report was. I should say whether he was in charge of the investigation, because he doesn't seem in charge of what the report actually says.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mueller, I'm over here, I'm sorry. Mr. Mueller, are you familiar with the now expired independent counsel statute? It's the statute under which Ken Starr was appointed.
Ken Starr did what? I'm sorry.
Are you familiar with the independent counsel statute?
Are you talking about the one we operating under now, or a previous?
No, under which Ken Starr was appointed.
I am not that familiar with that, but I'd be happy to take your question.
Well, the Clinton administration allowed the independent counsel statute to expire after Ken Starr's investigation. The final report requirement was a major reason why the statute was allowed to expire. Even President Clinton's AG, Janet Reno, expressed concerns about the final report requirement. And I'll quote AG Reno. She said, "On one hand, the American people have an interest in knowing the outcome of an investigation of their highest officials. On the other hand, the report requirement cuts against many of the most basic traditions and practices of American law enforcement. Under our system, we presume innocence and we value privacy. We believe that information obtained during a criminal investigation should, in most cases, be made public only if there is an indictment and prosecution, not in a lengthy and detailed report filed after a decision has been made not to prosecute. The final report provides a forum for unfairly airing a target's dirty laundry, and it also creates yet another incentive for an independent counsel to over-investigate in order to justify his or her tenure and to avoid criticism that the independent counsel may have left a stone unturned." Again, Mr. Mueller, those are AG Reno's words. Didn't you do exactly what AG Reno feared? Didn't you publish a lengthy report unfairly airing the target?
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay. Did you allow the people mentioned in your report to challenge how they were characterized?
I'm not going to get into
Okay.
that.
Given that AG Barr stated multiple times during his confirmation hearing that he would make as much of your report public as possible, did you write your report knowing that it would likely be shared with the public?
No.
Did knowing that the report could and likely would be made public, did that alter the contents which you included?
I can't speak to that.
Despite the expectations that your report would be released to the public, you left out significant exculpatory evidence. In other words, evidence favorable to the president, correct?
Well, I actually would disagree with you. I think we strove to put into the report exculpatory evidence as well.
McClintock got into that with you, where he said you said there was evidence you left out.
Well, you make a choice as to what goes into
Isn't it
indictment.
true, Mr. Mueller, isn't it true that on page 1 of volume 2, you state, when you're quoting the statute, that you had an obligation to either prosecute or not prosecute?
Well, generally that is the case.
Right.
Although most cases are not done in the context of the president.
And in this case, you made a decision not to prosecute, correct?
No, we made a decision not to decide whether to prosecute or not.
So essentially what your report did was everything that AG Reno warned against.
I can't agree with that characterization.
Okay. Well, what you did is you compiled a nearly 450 You compiled nearly 450 pages of the very worst information you gathered against the target of your investigation, who happens to be the President of the United States. And you did this knowing that you were not going to recommend charges and that the report would be made public.
Not true.
Mr. Mueller, as a former officer in the United States JAG Corps, I prosecuted nearly 100 terrorists in a Baghdad courtroom. I cross-examined the Butcher of Fallujah in defense of our Navy SEALs. As a civilian, I was elected a magisterial district judge in Pennsylvania, so I'm very well versed in the American legal system. The drafting and the publication of some of the information in this report without an indictment, without prosecution, frankly flies in the face of American justice. And I find those facts, this entire process, un-American. I yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Jim Jordan.
Director Mueller, the third FISA renewal happens a month after you're named special counsel. What role did your office play in the third FISA renewal of Carter Page?
Not going to talk to that.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Florida.